Service your existing car with us right now,
and it's worth £500 off your next car.
Yes, at Macklin Motors Toyota, we'll give you a £500 voucher off any of our brand new Toyotas when you book in for a service with our expert Toyota trained technicians.
We even have complimentary courtesy cars available, so book your service now and get £500 off any new Toyota.
Visit macklinmotors.co.uk or see us at Kennishead Road, Darnley.
Macklin Motors, the new name for Toyota sales and servicing in Glasgow.
Valid on services till 30th September. Excludes Motability and fleet customers. One £500 voucher per vehicle purchased by 31st December.
The Go Radio Football Show with macklinmotors.com. Your local friendly experts for new and used cars.
Let's go, go, go.
Well, the League Cup's been off and running for the best part of 2 weeks, and tonight we're talking European football. Yes, on the 21st of July. Motherwell kick off at 7:45 against Sligo Rovers. That's in the second qualifying round that leads, hopefully for them, to the Europa Conference League. Rangers could be bringing in Turkish left-back Ridvan Vilmaz even, but only if Besiktas lower their valuation. Fashion Sakala might be on the way out, as he they might not be on the way out actually, because he could knock back a possible move to France. There's lots of interest, it seems, around Celtic midfielder Matt O'Reilly. Hasn't taken long, but Ange Postecoglou is happy his players get admiring looks from the outside, and he's concentrating on further strengthening his squad. And we will hear tonight, if James doesn't break the studio, from one of Celtic's latest additions. Aaron Moy is going to be talking to us. Leanne Crichton is going to be talking to us hopefully as well. Leanne, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Rob. Yeah, nice to be back on Go.
How's the injury?
Getting there. I picked up a silly knock towards the end of last season, but it's kept me out of pre-season so far. Just now receiving a bit of treatment, hopefully get back on the pitch soon, but the girls are flying, so they won't be needing me this season. I'm sure of it.
So, I mean, you're a player and you're a coach, so your playing might be a little limited, but you've brought some good signings in.
We have a number of players that we've brought in, strengthening the goalkeeping department. Emily Much has joined us from Hibs, which is a really good addition for us. Another standout so far is Lucy Ronald, who joined us from Glasgow Women. She played SWPL2 last season, so she's stepped up this season, looking really good as pre-season goes. And we've got a good test this Sunday. We travel to Sunderland in a pre-season friendly, which will be nice. Down at the Academy of Light, we'll play down there, and I think just for the players it's a good experience, good exposure, and it'll give them a gauge for what the level's like down in England. So far pre-season's gone really well. A lot of preparing, a lot of planning. Thankfully the weather's been nice, which makes it much more enjoyable when you're out in the pitch and the sun's shining. There's a little bit of Scottish heat.
Will we be slapping England's women on the back for their comeback against Spain last night?
I think you've got to give them credit. I did think, looking at the clock, 82 minutes, they looked to be down and out, and the pressure of the stadium and the noise. I think eventually the fans rallied and got behind them. They rolled the dice, made some changes, tweaked the formation, they got themselves back in the game, and it's a goal that's worthy of winning any football match. I think, Georgia Stanway takes the responsibility. She shoots from distance, and it certainly wasn't going to be stopped, I don't think. You just see what it means to the players. They've invested a hell of a lot down in England. That's a bit that I think you need to give them credit. This isn't a short-term gain. If they manage to, I think it's a fourth consecutive tournament now that they've got to the semi-final stage, which is quite incredible. If they could go all the way, it certainly would be worth the investment that they've put in, because domestically, right now, they've probably got the strongest league in the world.
That shot was unstoppable. Are England stoppable, or who's your fancy to win?
I think France and Germany are the other two teams remaining that have really stood out with a lot of quality, and I think they'll have the same type of strength and depth to the squad. It comes down to nerves. I think it comes down to holding your own in the pressurised moments. You've seen that last night. Spain were comfortable at 1-0. As soon as the clock started to tick down and you get into that final 10 minutes, the mentality changes. All of a sudden you start to retreat. Your decision making is affected, so it's going to come down to the players that have perhaps been over the course, that understand what it takes to get through these types of games. But there's a lot of quality in the tournament. I think it's been fantastic. What a showcase tournament for women's football. Certainly the visualisation of it, the broadcasting of it has been top drawer. Yeah,
the fact that it's been on primetime BBC television,
it's incredible. I mean, every night coming in, even a couple of nights I've went out a walk after maybe the nights that I've been off training, you walk by and you can see TVs on in houses just because it's summer and the windows are open and everybody seems to have these big massive 70-inch TVs that are on the wall, and it's women's football that's on TV, and for that it almost stops you in your tracks at times to think, wow, we're actually here. And then you come home from training 8 o'clock at night, as you say, prime time spot, stick the football on, and it's women's football that's on TV. So it's been excellent, and that's what makes the difference, because the standard and the quality, as I say, it's been exceptional, and it's been well worth watching.
So if Leanne Crichton is walking past your house and looks in your window, she is involved in a research project finding out how many people are watching at the moment, and there is nothing untoward. So let's get that out of the way immediately.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. We're going to hear from Aaron Moy, who's been talking today about his move to Celtic. He's a player Ange Postecoglou knows very well, of course, from the Australian national team. He's 31. He's from Sydney originally. He had that spell, of course, at St Mirren, 2010 to 2012. He was there. He's been around a lot of clubs. Western Sydney Wanderers. He was at Melbourne City. He was Manchester City briefly. Huddersfield Town on loan. Made a big impression there. He was at Brighton. He played in China for a spell, and he's picked up 52 Australian caps along the way. And here he is talking today about the Ange Postecoglou style of play.
Yeah, hopefully it's a great time. The manager I obviously know from the national team for a few years. He likes to play good football, play on the deck, quick triangle patterns, and I enjoyed it a lot when I was working with him in the national team. So it obviously makes it a little bit easier for me, the transition, because I know sort of what he likes. So hopefully it all works out for me and for everyone.
Yeah, sounds really excited, doesn't he, about the prospect?
Playing it cool, isn't he?
He is. He's playing it pretty laid back. I mean, Ange Postecoglou has had such an incredible hit rate with his signings, and here's another one, Leanne, that he knows all about. And
I think that's important. You know, when you certainly a player that's 31 years old, you know, he's been about, he's done a number of clubs. What's important is that Ange Postecoglou knows the type of person that he is, and what kind of job he can do for the club, what qualities he's got, what skill set he has that's different from perhaps other players that are already there. Because I don't think Ange Postecoglou recruits players unless they're going to complement his squad. I don't think he just brings in numbers to bolster. I think he wants players that come in and can challenge and put the players that have got the jersey under a bit of pressure. Because without that, you know, those players in front tend not to perform, and certainly not perform as well. So it's an interesting signing. It's that familiarity. You know, and as you say, going by his track record, I don't think you could really doubt the signing too much. Perhaps it would raise an eyebrow or two, just because, you know, people be going to 31, you know, it's a short contract. Is there a long-term plan? Is it, what can he offer? But Ange Postecoglou must know that there's something that he's got that could be special.
What about position? Where will he play?
Early on in my career in Australia, I played in like a double pivot, and then through the middle of my career, maybe a bit more attacking. But yeah, lately with the national team, I was playing as a lone six. So wherever I play, I don't mind. I'm just here to help.
It's going to be interesting how he slots into that midfield area, because, well, right through the Celtic squad, there's massive competition. A
lot of strength, isn't there, in that midfield area? When you start to rhyme them off, you know, likes of Callum McGregor, who plays that pivot role, as he alludes to, that kind of 6-8 position, 2 central midfielders, or 3 central midfielders, however you want to look at it. He's a, you know, first name in the team sheet, but he's a player that plays 60 odd games a season. So is it an opportunity that you can rest him? Hatate, you know, looked to be a great signing last year. I would assume he would kick on again. O'Reilly in there has been top drawer since his arrival, a young player as well, lots of ambition, lots of quality. The one that probably I struggle to see where he'll fit in just now is McCarthy. You know,
there's Hidiguchi as well, isn't there?
Hidiguchi's there, yeah, but there's, you know, and Rogic is gone, so there is places there. When you look at the rotations in the squad last season and who would drop out, Rogic was in, O'Reilly was out, O'Reilly was in, Rogic was out. McGregor tended to be in the sheet all the time, and certainly started the majority of games. But McCarthy's just one that I don't see him being an Ange Postecoglou player moving forward. I could be wrong, and when you are James McCarthy and you see another Australian who clearly has a relationship already with the manager, who knows, you would assume that he's going to invest in him. So that could be alarm bells, I think, for him.
So do you think he might not have been an Ange Postecoglou signing? I mean, he was signed on the same day as Joe Hart.
Yeah,
those may well have been in the pipeline. And Celtic were panicking a bit at the time, it would have to be said, because they were so short of players.
Yeah, when you look at the length of the contract it got as well, a 4-year contract, which is quite substantial now when you look at contracts that are dished out, especially a player of James McCarthy's age and injury history that he had at the time. So that probably was a strange decision at best and did look like a panic scenario. Looking back with James McCarthy, it was his dream to come to Celtic Football Club. I don't think he would have knocked the opportunity regardless whether the manager was in place or not, and had really backed him as one of his signings. He's had an opportunity though. He's there day in, day out. He's on the training ground. He's in and around the club. He's had moments on the pitch. He just doesn't seem to have set things alight when he has had that opportunity. And Aaron Moore's just another player that adds pressure.
Yeah, could be a problem potentially, that, for Celtic. I mean, it pales into insignificance in a sense because so many of the signings have been so successful. But he's going to be on good money. He's on a 4-year deal. If Celtic want to loan him out somewhere else or try to get rid of him, it's going to be difficult. But they certainly seem to have a pretty well-stacked midfield, well-stacked squad. You mentioned Matt O'Reilly there. Quite a lot of talking going on about him at the moment. Leicester have been quoted with having an interest in him. It doesn't seem as if he's been too long in the door at Celtic, Matt O'Reilly, but he's done really well, and it's not a great surprise. And the fact that he's broken through into the Danish under-21 team as well, that raises his profile, and maybe not a surprise that there's a lot of interest around him.
Yeah, no, and I think when I look at Matt Riley, when he came to Celtic, I didn't know too much about him. And you start to research players and look at the background, a bit of digging in terms of the stats around those players as well. And when it comes to the stats, I've probably mentioned it before, but he's right up there. He's a top player. He's a top athlete. And when clubs look at that recruitment process just now, that's one of the key elements of recruitment, is how far they can run, how much they run, how much intensity they've got to what they do. Not only that, he's also a really technically gifted footballer, and he slotted into that Celtic team like he had probably been a player that had come through the academy almost. That it was a very seamless transition. Top performances, real standout moments, and he's a young player, as I mentioned. He's only going to get better, so that, no, it's no surprise that clubs are looking at him, but I'm sure that doesn't bother Ange Postecoglou too much. It means they're doing the right thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I have to keep checking his age. I was doing it right there. He's not 22 till November.
Yeah.
And I just can't quite believe that about him, because maybe it's the maturity with which he plays.
He does, yeah. And he's a player that never looks stressed. He doesn't ever get too animated looking on the pitch. I don't think he looks like a young player that at times could be, it's probably stereotypical, but irate, and certainly under moments of pressure, could lose her head a bit or look frustrated. He strolls through games, and he actually was very similar to a Tom Rogic type player like that, where his persona never changes, which to have that at 21 years old is pretty impressive. But he's clearly had a good education in the game, values this moment in his career as well at the club that he's playing, and performance wise, and if you get the opportunity, what is there to be stressed about, really?
Exactly. I was noting the comments of Ange Postecoglou today. He says about the interest, he says, I encourage it. If big clubs want our players, that's great. It means they're going well. I keep saying to the boys, they don't need to worry about their futures if they're the best they can be today. That kind of stuff, it doesn't come on my radar, so I don't worry about it. And that's very true, isn't it? I mean, you look across the city at Joe Aribo, best part of £10 million to Southampton, best part of £20 million for Bassi to Ajax. So that's what happens. But if you're making massive profit on players, then you can't really be complaining.
Well, this is it. And Bassi's a prime example. He didn't even play a full season, really, for Rangers. He was there, he was on the bench. It was only towards the last half of the season when he came in and showed how good he could be, and the versatility as well is helpful. But I think the market in Scotland, albeit clubs are now making a hell of a lot more than they once were, but when you look at the other markets across Europe and what other clubs are spending for players like for like, just based on the country that they play their football, so Ange Postecoglou's right. If clubs are looking at his players, it means they're doing something right. There's nothing to be stressed about. And if you're happy in your day job, Rob, as well, and you've got any aspirations and ambitions to move on or one day go to the English Premier League, performing is the only way that will get you there. You can have as many agents as you want, you can tout yourself about, But if you play, you perform, you'll certainly get the headlights, because the profile of being at, a Rangers and a Celtic, as we've seen with Calvin Bassey in the Europa League run, that was why clubs were looking at him, because you have that profile and that starts to grow, and you don't need to say too much about it. Just keep performing and the interest will come.
One player going back to Celtic who's maybe moving further and further out of the picture. I'm not sure if he's going to get many more opportunities to get himself in. And when you look at the attacking areas for Celtic, they've got so much going on. I wonder what you're thinking about Mikey Johnston. Is there another chance for him, or do you think he's a player that's going to be loaned out?
I think he's a player that has got a big decision to make, perhaps about his own career and his own future. And at times I think as a player you can wait patiently hoping that someone else makes that decision for you. But if I look at his injuries and I look at his history and I look at the amount of games that he's played for Celtic and the opportunities that he's had, I think he's got a lot of quality. I think he could really be a top player, but what he needs is a run of games. I think confidence is built on substance. You produce week by week, and that's where your confidence comes from. It then is transferred back from the pitch, in the training pitch, then onto the pitch in a weekend. So I think Mikey Johnston's got to make a decision for himself. Is he going to be a bit part player at Celtic? Because he probably ticks a number of boxes. He's had opportunities under Ange Postecoglou, but really going forward, is he happy being perhaps that player that comes off the bench for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, in and out the team, then maybe start some League Cup games? He starts to play the less important games, if you like, over the course of the season, because there is a number of games, so I've no doubt he will get chances. But I just think if he really wants to make a name for himself and prove how good he can be, I think he might need to go and put himself out there.
At the back for Celtic, there could be a change coming. Potentially it was Cameron Carter-Vickers and Carl Starfelt most of the way through last season, and the numbers were great, but there is still that doubt, I think, in the heads of some Celtic fans about Starfelt. He's come back injured, of course, with an injury on the back of international football and hasn't featured so far. And of course, in the meantime, Moritz Sientz has signed the German. It looks a bit of a unit. The pictures I've seen arriving from French football. Going to be interesting to see if that could be potentially the partnership this season.
Yeah, but I think it's good to have options there as well. You need strength, you need depth to your squad. As I mentioned, the amount of games over the season. Yes, there was question marks over Starfelt, I think, at the beginning of the season. Defensively, Celtic didn't look comfortable, but over time that clearly changed, and I think Cameron Carter-Vickers was a huge reason for that as well. He probably was unfortunate to miss out even being mentioned in like a team of the year or a player of the year, because he was so faultless at times and kind of just went about his business quietly. And as a centre-back pairing, they probably did that in a number of games. You only really look and put the spotlight over them when mistakes are made, and there was less mistakes last year certainly than we had seen the year before. So he's a player that I think will develop again. But competition's good, because what you don't want is players to get complacent, to think that their position is guaranteed. And any player that arrives in a pre-season always has the players that have been there previously on their toes, looking about, thinking, is he coming in, is she coming in, do they want my spot? Maybe Starfelt, he's thinking, go and take Cameron Carter-Vickers a shirt because you won't be taking mine.
Yeah.
That'll be the new centre-back pairing. So that's the way I think a player's mentality would be. I think as a pundit or a fan looking at it, you could see it slightly differently, because we can base our thoughts on the performances that we've seen over the last number of seasons. But certainly, as I mentioned, competition is always good, and it's healthy, I think, for the squad.
Leanne Crichton and Rob McLean talking football on Glasgow's Own.
The Go Radio Football Show with MacklinMotors.com. Your local friendly experts for new and used cars.
Let's go, 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 go.
Cheers, Chris. Thanks for that. Another update in about 20 minutes on all the traffic and travel across Glasgow and the West. Hibs could be heading towards the League Cup exit door. Quite a few clubs and managers under pressure already. It is incredible, isn't it? Just a few weeks into July, but that's the way it is. Hibs under pressure, firstly because they lost again last night to Championship Morton on penalties. They'd already lost at Falkirk in the group stages. And secondly, because they played Rocky Bushiri last night, who should have been suspended after a couple of earlier yellow cards. Someone at Hibs, Leanne, is going to be very unpopular at the moment.
Yeah, or could it be their saving grace that it looks like it's an admin error?
Well, it could be a smokescreen for an exit. Yeah. No, that they're in a tricky spot, and I said this, a number of weeks back. I think for managers at this time of the season,
there's a lot of questions over the League Cup and who does it benefit? Is it a good thing? Should it be happening? Is it too early? Which for a pundit it feels pretty early. You know, it feels like we've never stopped and we're back across the game. So I can only imagine how it feels for the players. But I think we've all got our heads around the fact that that is football now. There's not a big break. There's too many competitions. There's too much going on. Summer football, tournaments, you name it, clubs are part of it. European football, the fact that the Scottish team's involved in that, it's always going to narrow that window. So for me, I think it is what it is and you just need to embrace it. There's no surprise that it's coming. You know, you knew when the season ended last year what date you started back, so you need to plan and prepare for that, whether it comes down to recruitment or not, having players back, fresh, fit, available, whatever it may be. So the excuses, I think, have got to be eliminated at the very get-go. It's almost the same for every team, and I know there could be a few moments over the course that it affects different clubs in certain ways, but I think Hibs are a team that if they win the games and they do really well, it puts them in a good spot because Lee Johnson can go off to a flyer, and I think, you know, fans would get right on board looking at it. You know, quick start, they scored 5 against Clyde, they look to be free-flowing football, then they follow that up with a defeat on the Tuesday. So then there's question marks over that performance. Then they don't, kick on and win the next match. People start to go, is he the right man for the job? He's immediately under pressure before effectively the domestic season in terms of the league has even started or is even close to get going. But if you go on a good run, I think everybody goes, oh, brilliant, this looks great. You know, a couple of results, doesn't matter who you've played. They just look at the 3 points, they look at the goals that have been scored, and all of a sudden there's that feel-good factor. So it can certainly work both ways. And other clubs that are doing a better job at it just now, but Hibs are one that there's question marks now over the level of performance and whether Lee Johnson is now going to be the right man, which is so wrong really when you look at how short a time he's been in. But it was the same with Sean Maloney. They were ruthless when they got rid of Jack Ross as well. So the club cannot afford not to get this one right. And when I look through their squad, even from last night, I mean, it's a strong enough squad when you look at the players that were there from last season and the couple of additions that have come in. Like Kenna came in with, huge reviews and people raving about him after the first couple of games. That it was looked like a real gem. They just can't buy the results.
If you use the Sean Maloney sliding scale of games you get at Hibs, he's got about 15 left. Sean got 19 games in charge, 4 already for Lee Johnson, 2 really damaging defeats. And you just wonder when you win 5-0 against Clyde and then you go into the next game and you make 6 changes, what does that do to the attitude, the mentality? Well, I was at the game and I think I saw what it did to the mentality. They could have been 2 or 3 down at half time.
Because I think that to me looks as if you're treating it like a pre-season game.
A bit of arrogance,
where you would
maybe
make those types of changes, and you can get away with that to a point. I think certain clubs could get away with that. I'm not sure that Hibs can afford to do that off the back of the performances in their league place finish last season, because it just wasn't good enough by the club standards, the fans' expectations. It fell way short. So I think whether it was Lee Johnson's responsibility or not, he is accountable for how they start this season. And as far as the fans are concerned, their season's already started. So as I say, he's under pressure now, but to make 6 changes, I think even players would maybe be going, let's just get a bit of momentum. Let's just play. I want to play. I would rather play. I know I would as a player. I would rather play games than train. And I know it's early on in the season where you maybe don't want to risk players with injuries and playing, consecutive games too quickly together. But I think the players are used to that now. Even I'm saying that in my head, saying that out loud, but in my head I'm going, again, that's just another excuse, because that is the norm. Playing 3 games a week as a footballer has been the norm for a long, long time. And clubs need to get used to it. So the rotation part just becomes an excuse. If that's the reason why you don't win the game.
The other potential problem, of course, is that you're used to playing European qualifiers. Hibs are a team, Aberdeen are a team that at this time of the season, you're used to preparing for European qualifiers, not being involved. It's relatively new, this League Cup format, but we've had it for the last 2 or 3 years, so we know it's there. You have to adapt. You have to get your hands dirty in a sense at this time of the season.
That's what I'm saying. It's no surprise. They know this is happening. Lee Johnson would have known when the first game of the season would be, and that would be the League Cup group section. So, he wouldn't be planning for the league starting, and going, we'll just pass up those games Sure, the fans won't mind, even though we're asking them to pay good money and come and watch us, and there's a bit of broadcasting and coverage around the game. We'll just go about it and do our thing. That's not good enough. As a Hibs supporter, that is not good enough.
Yeah.
And as you say, if it was a European qualifier that we're playing at this stage of the season, would the manager or the club be so blasé? And even the fact there's an admin error chucked in there as well around Rocky Bashiri, which was just criminal. Really, that you have that oversight at a club with the amount of resources that Hibs have got, that goes unnoticed.
And it's the first trophy of the season as well, isn't it? If you're a Hibs fan, you're thinking, right, let's get back in the top 6, let's get some credibility in the league this season, and also let's do what we've done fairly consistently in recent seasons, and that's get to semi-finals and finals. So if you go out in the group stage, that's one tournament gone already.
Well, that's the thing, Robin. I'm not sure which manager it was that said it, but I read it online maybe last week or the week before. Motivate the players by not speaking about the group section. What about a packed out Hampden Park in a semi-final? That's your motivation. A final, So it's the end destination. As much as you need to work through the journey and the process, that's what you get at the end of it. It's not. You're not just making up the numbers. You're not just hoping that you got and get good performances and a bit of momentum. You want to win silverware. That's the only thing you'll remember in your career when you look back. It's the one thing that as a manager or a player, people will go, he or she won this and that when they were at that club. They won't remember a run of 10 games. They won't remember, he went unbeaten or she went unbeaten for X amount, and they looked really good in the preliminary rounds of the cup. They go, no, they got to a cup final, got a semi-final. We're speaking about England women at the Euros, 4 consecutive semi-finals now they've got to. That is a team now that's got a calibre and a standard that they have. And Hibs are one of those teams. That's what they've had over the last number of years, as you mentioned. They've made a thing of getting to cup finals and semi-finals, and they look like they're just close enough to passing it by already.
I think there is a natural comparison at the moment, isn't there, between Hibs and Aberdeen, because both had similarly disappointing seasons last time around. They've made a lot of signings. They're trying to get back to the levels where they've been previously. And what you see, Aberdeen are not exactly ripping up trees at the moment, but they haven't lost a goal. They've scored 9 in their 3 group games so far. And they are starting to build a little bit of momentum, make a little bit of progress.
Yeah, and perhaps what Jim Goodwin had, though, was the opportunity. He's 6 months ahead of Lee Johnson, perhaps a bit more. He's been able to get in at Aberdeen. He could see what needed change or what Jim Goodwin wanted his Aberdeen side to look like. He was afforded opportunities to drop points at the end of the season. And
even though he suffered a bit last season, it was a chance to assess.
He was never seen as accountable for Aberdeen's position, albeit I think they could have done a bit better even when Jim came in, and I think he's maybe been lucky enough that he's not carried that over into this part of pre-season and the early part of the season so far, and that the early signs from Aberdeen, as you mentioned, they do look a bit better in terms of the goals conceded and whatnot. So Lee Johnson and Jim Goodwin is, I think you can pair Aberdeen and Hibs together, but I think in terms of managers just now, you might just need to cut Lee Johnson a little bit of slack in that sense. If he gets time, as you mentioned, going by Hibs' standards, he's maybe got 15 games left or something to get it right, which would be close to maybe what Jim Goodwin had at the end of last season, when he took over the job. So he's had a bit of time. He's brought in his new signings. He's got that feel-good factor. They look as if they're enjoying it. The want-away players, like a Lewis Ferguson, that there was a lot of speculation around his career and his future is now gone. So it's another player that you need not to worry about, because there's always that, will he stay, will he go, do you need to replace him, will he be here for the season? And that can cause unrest within the squad. So I'm sure Aberdeen and Jim Goodwin will now be content at the point they've got to with the players and the recruitment, maybe try and add 1 or 2 before the window closes.
So it's a little bit of early season pressure on Lee Johnson that you could have done without. It's a bit early to be pressing any buttons at this stage, but it doesn't help if you're crashing out of the League Cup already. St Johnstone have had their problems in the first few games of the season. The problem for Callum Davidson is that will be stacked on top of what happened last season. I think, and there may be a little bit of unrest unless he can get off to a good start in the Premiership. Stephen Robinson is another one. Struggled really when he came in initially. Of course, he was inheriting a team that was actually doing pretty well at the time, St Mirren, so, which presents a challenge. But when you get when you get a couple of bad results, as they've had in these group stages, the St Mirren fans will be feeling a little bit restless at the moment.
Yeah, and another one that's maybe making changes to the team as well and trying to utilise a squad of players rather than just trying to build the foundations for a winning team, because that's really, really important. I think Stephen Robinson came in, as you said, St Mirren were in a good place under Jim Good when he left. They were okay, they certainly weren't in crisis. Number of weeks went by and then there was, I think, a couple of excuses thrown about that he needed to change things because it wasn't how his team should be playing and how his team should be performing, and he had tried not to do that. Well, it already looks like he's maybe struggling to find that identity already, and there's not been too much unrest in terms of the overhaul of the playing squad either, so there has been a bit of consistency. They've added a number of players as well, but I just look at Stephen Robinson and the demeanour that he had towards the end of last season, and I don't know if he'll get much time at St Mirren to get it right.